Thank you. Thank you, Jane, for having me. Thanks to all of you for choosing to spend some time here this evening. Before we do anything else, please introduce yourselves to the people who are around you, to your right and to your left and in front of you and behind you. To meet you.
And I know your daughter's name is India.
India, yes.
And so is mine.
Oh.
You'll be signing her book.
Good taste. All right. Let's all together take a very deep breath and close our eyes. We see in the middle of our mind a little ball of golden light. And we watch this light as it begins to grow, larger and larger until now it covers the entire inner vision of our mind. And we see for ourselves within this light a beautiful temple. We see a garden that surrounds the temple and a body of water that flows through the garden. We see that the inside of the temple is lit as well by this same beautiful golden light. And here we are, for we have been drawn together by the power and in the presence of God. We devote our time spent together, all of our relationships and experiences of one another to Him, and we pray that His holiest Spirit be upon us, lifting us above and beyond all regions of sorrow, limitation, and despair to the fields of infinite peace and love that lay beyond. And so it is, together, we all say, amen. Okay, so I don't know whether to start with the good news or the bad news. There's something on this side I noticed, so maybe okay, so there's some good news and the bad news. The bad news everybody here is very aware of, and by that I mean the state of the world today. It doesn't take much. All of us are conscious, intelligent people. We've read the papers. We know what's going on in the world. Many of the problems have to do with your nation, my nation, some other nation. Although when you talk about the kind of economic woes, climate change woes, and so forth, what's really affecting and detracting on a cultural and political, and social and economic level in one part of Western civilization is the same as what's occurring in any other part of Western civilization. And we have climate change, of course, which is a collective issue. We have problems in the Middle East and ISIL and so forth, which is basically a threat and a problem which confronts us all to varying degrees. In A Course in Miracles, there's a point where it says, look at the crucifixion, but do not dwell on it. Now, from a and I'm having a little problem with this, I'm sure you are too. It seems, what do you think? Do you think you got to, maybe it seems better already? Oh, that seems better, whatever you did, I think you got it. Thank you. A Course in Miracles, as I said, says, look at the crucifixion, but do not dwell on it. I'm a student of A Course in Miracles. I'm sure many of you are students of the Course in Miracles. Even if you're not students of the Course in Miracles, you probably know the basic, you've heard of it or whatever. The Course is not a religion. It is a psychological, it's a self-study program of spiritual psychotherapy, a psychological training. There's no doctrine, there's no dogma. It's based on universal spiritual themes. It's basically a psychological course in the practice of forgiveness, and the goal of the course is inner peace. The idea is that truth with a capital T is one, and it's spoken in many different ways. Many of them religious, many of them spiritual, many of them secular. The excitement, really, of studying comparative religious and theological and spiritual principles is that you'll hear one and you go, yeah, I already know that. I hear that in the Kabbalah. Yeah, that's just like in Buddhism. Oh, yeah, that's just like in mystical Christianity. Oh, yeah, that's just like in the Old Testament, or whatever. And so the Course in Miracles does use some traditional Christian terminology, but in very decidedly non-traditional psychotherapeutic ways. So when the Course in Miracles talks about the crucifixion, it's talking about the crucifixion as the energy pattern by which the mind of fear would invalidate and ultimately, if it can, destroy the power of love and life. And resurrection is the energy pattern by which love, i.e. God, always gets the final say. Now, the crucifixions of our lives, symbolized, of course, by the crucifixion of Jesus, the personal crucifixions of our lives are much like the collective crucifixions of our lives. Because the ego, fear-based mind that is the crucifier in your life or in my life works collectively as well. All that a nation is a collection of individuals. So if you have enough fear-based individuals, enough greedy individuals, enough selfish individuals, enough insane individuals, you have an insane group of them. And as we know, groups are very much the issue on the planet at this time. So the same principles that apply to personal transformation apply to collective and planetary transformation as well. Look at the crucifixion, but do not dwell on it. If you're looking at the state of the world today and not grieving, to some extent, I think you must not be looking. But on the other hand, if you are not looking at the state of the world and deeply excited about the possibilities, the transformation that could happen, the miracles that we could have, then you are not yet spiritually informed in ways that perhaps you could be. So that's why I said you want to talk about the good news or the bad news. I feel like we've already touched on the bad news. You don't need me to tell you. You know what the personal crucifixions are. Somebody's divorce, somebody's addiction, somebody's financial ruin, somebody's diagnosis of a life-challenging illness. We all know what those personal crucifixions are, and as I've already mentioned, we know what our collective ones as well. Look but don't dwell, the Course in Miracles says. If all we did tonight was talk about how terrible everything is, then we'd all leave here like, ugh. But we mention it because there is a difference between transcendence and denial. You know, there's this kind of faux, artificial spirituality in the world today. I don't know if you have it here in Ireland. Sure have it in California. Which goes something like this. I can't take all that negativity. All I can do is try to be positive. I found that I'm an empath and I'm very, very sensitive. And if I read the newspaper, I get so upset. All I can do is make my own life more positive. That is not positive, ladies and gentlemen. That is an adult acting like a child. There is nothing holy about complacency, nor is there anything negative about yelling fire if, in fact, the house is burning down. So this is spirituality should be a call to all of us to be very mature. Spiritual seekers should be the greatest grown-ups. We too often are infantilized by the societies in which we live, but the reason the spiritual seeker is too often infantilized is because we don't take on the grown-up subjects. But in fact, those of us who have come to a point in our lives where we have at least some familiarity about how spiritual principles can transform our lives, we are the last people who should be sitting out the big questions of our time, because if you have a clue as to what changes one heart, then you're somebody who has a clue as to what would change the world. So denial is when you just look away from the darkness of the world. Some people say, even supposedly from the basis of the Course in Miracles, that is what we are called to do. That is not a complete reading. Maybe they read just some pages or something. We are not here to ignore the darkness. We are here to transform the darkness. That darkness is all happening within a realm of illusion. It's all just one vast mortal hallucination. But that doesn't mean that people aren't suffering within it. And there's no serious spiritual path that gives any of us a pass on addressing the suffering of other sentient beings. So we are not here to deny, we are here to transcend. But you know, if you have a broken leg and you go to the doctor doesn't say, let's look at that elbow, shall we? You have to address the wound in order to heal it. Now, in doing this, once again, the doctor's going to have to look at that broken leg. And also in our personal healing, you know, if you're Catholic, you go to confession. Excuse me. If you're Jewish, the holiest day of the year is Yom Kippur, the Day of Atonement. In the 12 steps of Alcoholics Anonymous, you have to take a fearless moral inventory and admit the exact nature of your wrongs, of your character defects. And so spiritual healing is a kind of emotional detoxification process. We have to look at the depth of our own error. We have to look deeply at the cause behind the effects in our lives that we don't like. And ultimately, when we do that, we see that, at least to a great extent, those of us who are adults, there are very few cases where we wouldn't have to say I was not at least entirely a victim here. If you look at something, for instance, like ISIL, well, as an American, I'm very aware that the invasion of Iraq, you cannot overestimate the role that that absurd, immoral, horrifying mistake, crime really, played in creating ISIL. Now, I know England went along with that. Did Ireland go along with that? No, I think it was the Americans were joined by England, Australia, and Poland, I believe. Only when those of us, the nations that did invade Iraq, really allow ourselves to take in the full horror of what we created will we reach into the deep spiritual level of atonement out of which a miracle will flow. We were talking the other day, a friend and I, about what's happening in the world, about ISIL, about all the issues occurring in the Middle East, about so much going on the planet. And my friend said, well, there's no easy answer. But from a spiritual perspective, the point is not that there's no easy answer. It's that there's no complicated answer. There's only an easy answer. A complicated answer would mean an answer that the mortal mind could come up with. The mortal mind, you know, they say in Alcoholics Anonymous, your best thinking got you here. The Western civilization, to the extent to which the short-term economic gain of great multinational corporate institutions have really been placed before the common good of the peoples of the world over the last few years, that is the initial cause here. Our lack of reverence towards life itself, our lack of reverence towards the planet, our lack of reverence towards people like ourselves, and so forth. And so, as Einstein said, we will not solve the problems of the world from the level of thinking that we were at when we created them. And so when I say there's no complicated answer, there's only a simple answer, what I mean is that we have basically come up to the end. We've come up to the limits of what the mortal mind can do. The mortal mind, when it is not placed at the service of love, can be a very, very destructive thing. And that's what I want to talk to you about tonight. A Course in Miracles says that all of us are ideas in the mind of God or love, and that an idea cannot leave its source. That's the truth of who we are. We are ideas in the mind of God, the Course in Miracles says. And we were born into this world in that eternal innocence, original innocence. But very shortly after we got here, we were taught a thought system that dominates this planet. Now, in the Course in Miracles, it says, there's a quote where it says, in the Bible, it says that Adam fell asleep, and nowhere does it say that he woke up. So the idea is that many, many ages ago, humanity fell into this mortal hallucination, into this deep sleep. The great religious figures of history are called the awakened ones. They have awakened from this dream. And the central figures in this dream are human bodies. And within the mindset created by a brain that is basing its perception of reality on what the physical senses perceive, you and I appear to be separate. On this three-dimensional plane, you're over there and I'm over here. And so the mind that perceives reality, according to that mental filter, is completely opposite from the part of the mind that knows spiritual reality. Because on spiritual reality, the level of spiritual reality, the idea is, there's actually no place where you stop and I start. According to my physical eyes, you're over there and I'm over here. But the spiritual concept is your spirit isn't just encased in your body and then it stops at the confines of your skin. My spirit is not encased in my body and then stopped at the confines of my skin. Rather, your spirit emerges outward. Your body is just like a suit of clothes. It's your headquarters in this lifetime. My spirit continues beyond my body, and there's actually no place where you stop and I start. The Course in Miracles says we are like waves in the ocean, thinking we're separate from other waves. Now, let's talk about the psychological difference between thinking I'm separate from other waves in the ocean versus thinking I'm one with other waves in the ocean. If I think that I'm one little wave in the ocean, separated from all the others, how could I not be terrified? How could I not feel isolated? How could I not live in horror that at any given moment I might be overwhelmed by the rest of the ocean? But if instead I realize, hey, I'm one with the ocean. I make a move, it makes a move. This whole thing, I'm one with it. This powerful thing, I'm one with it. Now think of the psychological difference between those two. So you and I, A Course in Miracles, and many other, Buddhism certainly says this, all the great religious systems, all the great spiritual systems have those universal spiritual themes inside of them, and too many of these institutions, if not all of them to some extent, have been so co-opted by the ego mind for the ego's purposes that those religious practices have lost their genuine spiritual and moral authority in too many cases. So what's happening today is a great spiritual revival in which more people, whether dwelling still within organized and institutional religious structures and helping to enliven and revitalize them or not, are recognizing those universal spiritual themes that we don't really need dogma or doctrine in order to embrace and apply in our lives. So this leaves us with the human mind split in two. One part of the mind, totally knowing who we are, totally knowing that I'm love and you're love, and that's all that matters and that all that's going on. We all have that. We were born with it. But we were trained from the time we were very, very small to distrust each other, to see the other person as outside us, to think that if you win, there's less for me, to think that we need to compete in order to get ahead, to think that your good means that there's less for me, and so forth. So that by a very young age, natural loving thinking that's about blessing and compassion and embrace actually starts to feel unnatural and unsafe to us. And that which is filled with attack and filled with defense and filled with fear actually feels more natural. So the process of enlightenment is not a learning process, it is an unlearning. Mahatma Gandhi said, the problem with the world is that humanity is not in its right mind. And so what is happening today on the planet, what must happen for the human race to survive, is the dismantling of the thought system that got us here. Any species, when it gets to a point, if it gets to a point, where its collective behavioral patterns are maladaptive for the survival of the species, one of two things is going to happen. It's either going to continue with that maladaptive behavior and possibly go extinct, or a mutation occurs. And that mutation represents an alternative way of being. And even though the mutation does not represent the majority of the species, the descendants of the mutation have a greater probability of survival. And so the species moves in that direction. That is what is happening on the planet today. Our collective behavioral pattern, the way we treat the earth, the way we treat each other, The way what is happening on this planet today is unsustainable. Now, I know living in a nation like Ireland, you certainly have your own experience of the same. We're all living that microcosm, but whether in any given decade one particular country is taking the hit or not, the world has become so interconnected at this time that if it's a collective issue anywhere, it ultimately becomes a private issue everywhere, certainly if we're talking about the advanced democracies of the world. So, the Course in Miracles talks about miracles. It talks about what is basically a self-organizing and self-correcting universe. And what that means is, because we have not been living our lives based on love, the basic organizing principle of the universe is the law of cause and effect, what is called in the East karma. For every cause there is effect. And we have had so much fear-based cause that now we have all this effect, fear-based effect. But the healing, the atonement, the confession, the acknowledgement, the willingness for us to look at this, the willingness of us to say, we get it, we got it wrong, and we are willing to evolve as people. We are willing to say that humanitarian principles rather than economic principles should be the bottom line in how we order our cities and our countries and our planet. We are willing to recognize that the love that will save the world is not just your children or my children, but children on the other side of town and children on the other side of the world. We are willing to recognize that when the mind does not wake up in the morning and devote itself to love, that it's much like a cell in the body. You know, every cell in the body is infused with a kind of natural intelligence. And by that natural intelligence, from the very beginning, the egg, the sperm, and then all these cells begin to appear, and they begin to divide, and they begin to collaborate. And one cell is assigned to create a heart, and another the lungs, and another the liver, and another the eyeballs, and the other the brain, in this extraordinary process. And even then, after the embryo becomes the baby, the cells continue to be imbued with this natural intelligence, so that your heart continues to beat and your lungs continue to breathe. But every once in a while, a cell goes insane. And it forgets. It disconnects from its natural intelligence. And instead of saying, I am going to collaborate with the other cell to serve the healthy functioning of the brain, or to serve the healthy functioning of the liver, or to serve the healthy functioning of the lungs, it goes, no, I don't want to. I'd rather go do my own thing. I want to go build my own kingdom. I want to go get other cells who think like I do, and we'll just be over here. What do we call that, ladies and gentlemen? Cancer. It's a malignancy. It's a malignant pattern in the body, and it's a malignant pattern in consciousness, and that is what has happened to the human race. We have been infected by a malignant consciousness, and that is the consciousness of I'm only here to do what I want to do. And now there is a faux spirituality that actually would tell you that's the most spiritual thing you could possibly do. Figure out what you want and go do it. What do you think ISIL's doing except figuring out what they want and going off to do it? What do you think Hitler did except figure out what he wants and going off to do it? That is not spiritual, and deeply at the deepest level, it is not even sane. What is sane is not that you say to universal forces, give me what I want. What is sane is that you wake up every morning and you say, love, what would you have me do today? How might I serve and be guided by that natural intelligence, which will, by definition, lead me to other cells with whom I can collaborate in creating a more beautiful world. That's what makes the soul happy. And just like every cell has been assigned, you're assigned to the blood, you're assigned to the bones, you're assigned to the brain. So are we. You're assigned to Ireland. I was assigned to America. My daughter was born in America, but apparently assigned to England. You're assigned to Africa. You're assigned to Russia. You're assigned. And others are you're assigned to the sciences. You're assigned to the arts. You're assigned to politics. All of us collectively, to some extent, assigned to politics. You're assigned to business. We all feel that dharmic call within us. We all feel like I really want to. None of us wake up in the morning and go, I yearn to rob a bank. But we are taught, when I think of the worst mistakes I made in my life, I didn't wake up that morning and go, I think I'll be a jerk today. We get misguided because when the mind of love, when we are not dedicating ourselves to the mind of love, this planet is very confusing because the thought system that dominates here is such a thought system based on fear. So we have a sick consciousness. Humanity is in a very sick place. And in our sickness, we have manifest some very, very sick manifestations. That's the crucifixion. And what about the resurrection? You know, when Buddha first was born, he was born a prince, Siddhartha, of a very wealthy, very powerful father, the king. And the king was told by a seer when his son was born that your son will grow up to be either a great king, great military commander, or a great holy man. And Siddhartha's father said, I don't want him to be a holy man. I want him to be a king like his father. So the father surrounded his royal household with very thick walls. And he created within the compound everything that he thought could possibly keep Siddhartha there. Every pleasure, every aspect of wonderfulness that he could imagine. Educational, artistic, personal, creative. And Siddhartha grew up there, never saw suffering, never saw decay, never saw anything but what was beautiful. But at a certain point in his life, his heart was restless and he knew that there was more. And one night he escaped the castle compound. And that is when Siddhartha saw age and death and suffering for the first time. And that was the beginning of Buddha's journey to enlightenment. The Israelites were enslaved by Pharaoh in Egypt. And it was Moses who was touched by the suffering of the Jews, even though he had not been raised as a slave. He was told by God to lead the Israelites out of Egypt. Not only is the suffering of the slaves while they were in Egypt, but also the suffering of the Exodus during the next 40 years. And of course, suffering is at the core of the Christian story, the suffering of Jesus on the cross. That's not the end of the story. The end of the story is that Buddha became enlightened. The end of the story is that the Israelites were led into the promised land. And the end of the story is the resurrection. So we're halfway through the story here. You know, you never hear a Christian who says, I'm not going to go to Easter service this year, I know the story. You never hear a Jew say, I'm not going to go to Passover Seder this year, I know the story. The story doesn't change, but we do. And our understanding deepens. And we understand that the Pharaoh is the ego mind inside us. We understand that the crucifixion is our own addiction, our own bankruptcy, our own failure and humiliation, and so forth. But that 40 years between the time when Moses led the Israelites out of Egypt and the moment when it was Joshua who led them into the promised land, those 40 years, and those 3 days between the crucifixion and resurrection are extremely important symbols. They are symbols of the time it takes for the material plane to catch up with the change in consciousness that occurs during the time of the crucifixion. You with me? We know that there was somebody crucified to Jesus' left and crucified to his right. We didn't hear about them resurrecting. When Moses stood before the Red Sea, this is my mother. My mother had an inimitable way of teaching her children Bible stories. This is what she would say. So, here's Moses, and he's standing in front of the water. And the Egyptians are coming up from behind because Pharaoh decided that he wanted his slaves back. Oi. So if they go forward, they're going to drown. If they go back, they're going to be taken back to slavery. Now, kids, Moses was told by God to take his staff, to touch the water, and the water parted. And then she would say, now, kids, notice, there were Israelites to his right, and there were Israelites to his left. But it was only Moses that parted the sea. If Moses hadn't been there, it would have just been Jews at the beach. Now, she got the point, of course. I never forgot that, yeah. So Jesus is crucified and so are the others, but only Jesus resurrects. Moses is standing there, but so are other Israelites, but only Moses parts the Red Sea. What is this about? It's about the mind of Moses. It's about the mind of Jesus. It's about the mind of Buddha. This is what the mutations represent. This is what the avatars represent. People whose consciousness has evolved. Because remember a few minutes ago when I said there are no complicated answers. There are only simple answers. And that is that we evolve as a human race high enough. Now, this is an interesting concept here. What the Course in Miracles says is that God's plan for the salvation of the world is called the plan of the teachers of God. So this isn't about looking for a Buddha or a Jesus or a Moses or a Muhammad, because these have already lived. Now, there might be enlightened masters on the planet today. I'm very open to that. I don't think I've met any, but this is not to say that there aren't any. But it is to say that the zeitgeist of this moment and the plan of the teachers of God is not that one person does it. One person has already done it because there's only one mind. So whatever has been accomplished is now an option for everyone. The plan for the teachers of God is a plan for a whole bunch of us. The Course in Miracles says, the teacher of God is anyone who chooses to be one. They come from all religions and no religions. They are those who have heard the call. And many are called, but few are chosen, means everyone's called, the Course in Miracles says, but few care to listen. The call is coming to all of us all the time, every moment, every day. We all have a direct radio link, just like every cell has an internal guidance system leading it to collaborate with the cells with whom they can synergistically support the organ and the organism of which they are part. We all have that guidance system. It is imbued in consciousness. In Christian terms, it is called the Holy Spirit. It is the voice for God. The problem is there is so much static we can't hear. There's so much static we can't hear the direct radio link because the thinking of the world and the talking of the world and the input of the ego always speaks first and speaks loudest. We wake up in the morning, and when our mind is most open to receive it, we go directly for the internet, we go directly for the news, we go directly for the newspaper, and we just download the fear of the world. And that is why meditation is everything at this time. In A Course in Miracles, the Course in Miracles has a workbook. The crux of the Course is the second book, which is the 365 days of meditation exercises. Some of us meditate with the workbook of the Course. There's transcendental meditation, there's Buddhist meditation, there's so many forms of meditation today. You live in a world-class city, I'm sure that there must be all kinds of those kinds of activities and classes here, and of course these things are mainstream now. When we wake up in the morning and we take a shower and a bath, we don't want to take yesterday's dirt with us into the day. But if we don't purify our consciousness, we're taking yesterday's stress out into the day. And what this does is it decreases our capacity to be used as vessels. It decreases our capacity to be teachers of God. To teach metaphysically means to demonstrate. And God means love. In the Gospel of Thomas, Jesus said to the disciples, go out into the countryside and teach the gospel. He did not mean go out all around the world and hit people over the head with our book. He meant go out into the world and be love. Now in the book of Thomas, the disciples said to Jesus, well, what will we say? And his response was, I will tell you when you get there. That as you and I, through serious spiritual practice, through waking up in the morning and going into the vertical, you go into the vertical plane in order to gain effectiveness on the horizontal plane. You go into your deep relationship with God in order to be most effective with other human beings and the circumstances of the world. You build your relationship with the divine in order to cultivate your strength and power as a human being. You make God your primary relationship. This means we meditate, this means we pray, this means we wake up in the morning, where would you have me go? What would you have me do? What would you have me say? And to whom? It means we wake up in the morning and we send our love to everybody we're going to meet today, both those people that we know and those people that we don't know. It means if we're in a business, we're at work, we go, oh, it's not really a store, it's not really a legal office, it's not really a medical practice, that's just a front for what's really going on. The God in me is going to go meet the God in other people today. And we, in our collaboration, i.e. right relationship, are going to dwell in a space of light during these darkened times. Fear is to love what darkness is to light. You turn on the light, the darkness is gone. You turn on the love, the fear is gone, whether it's ISIL or climate change or economic breakdown or deep poverty throughout the world. It can only transform on a fundamental level when there is this evolution of consciousness. But the evolution of consciousness has got to move now to a more mature level. You know, I started lecturing on A Course in Miracles over 30 years ago. And I would speak to a group like this, and people were really like, oh my God, I've never heard these ideas. Those days are over. The vast majority of people in this room, if not all of you, are familiar with these ideas now. We have all read the same books and listened to the same tapes. This is mainstream now. The issue is for us to take that next level where it's beyond data collection. You don't need any more data. You don't need any more people just to come up here and go over with you the basic concepts. We all get the basic concepts. The issue is now living the basic concepts, often easier said than done, at a deeper level than we had done before. Now let me give you an example. I was teaching yesterday before I flew here. It was in London at a yoga studio. And a woman started talking to me about lack of mental health services for children in London and how bad this is. And she asked me, what do we do? And I asked her to come up onto the stage, and I said, every word you said to me was fine. Everything you said. It was eloquently spoken. It was very profound, the information that you imparted. But it came from a place in you, which we all go into sometimes, where we're cowering, men with a little bit of boy, woman with a little bit of little girl, and asking someone what to do. I said, please say everything that you just said to me now to your fellow citizens who are in this room, not from a place of asking me what to do, but from a place of informing your fellow Londoners, knowing that when an idea is shared, it is stronger, and assuming that since we're all intelligent adults, once enough of us awaken to, number one, the information, number two, nobody's going to fix it unless we do, and number three, through the grace of God we can, then there will be a field of miraculous possibility that there would not otherwise have been. And that changed the molecular structure in the room. Because she went from saying these things and asking me, I'm an American, what do I know about how you're going to get better health services in England for your young people, right? So asking me, let's take that next step from, oh, I get what the problem is, at which point, with the ego mind, we either, I can't look, it's too awful, or you're overwhelmed by the upset of it, both of which are ineffective. Now it's about claiming our power as teachers of God, as people who have devoted ourselves, and how do we know? Because we did it this morning. How do we know? Because we woke up this morning and we meditated and we prayed and we said to God, use me today. Use me today. And then you stand up, and enough with, too many women particularly, we need to learn how to speak in declarative sentences. No more questioning, no more ditziness, no more trembling lip, over. Because let me tell you something, ladies and gentlemen, if the women of the advanced democracies on this planet, in every advanced mammalian species that survives and thrives, there is a common anthropological characteristic, which is the fierce behavior of the adult female of the species when she senses a threat to her cubs. You see it in the bears, you see it in the lions, you see it in the tigers. And when a female adult tiger or lion or bear stands up with that fierceness, we don't say she has anger issues. We don't say that she's strident. We know that she's answering the call of the ages. And so what is happening today is that the adult female of the human race needs to stand up in the fierce aspect of the divine feminine. And let me be very clear here. With 1 billion people on this planet, for instance, living on basically a little over €1 and less a day, it's called deep poverty, the bottom billion they're called. With the 1 billion above that, living on €2 and less a day. And when the advanced democracies of the world at all their fancy G8 meetings and so forth, could, if they wished, if they chose, get together and simply decide. It would cost about $100 billion over the next 10 years, which is 1/7 of the money that the United States spends on our defense budget every year. If the advanced nations of the world simply got together and said, within the next 10 years, we will eradicate deep poverty from the planet, that would occur. And that would occur if the women of these countries simply stood up as women and said, this shit stops now. But the ego mind tells us that we're all alone and we're just those separate waves and we're just, trying to hold on. I know many of us came into whatever our spiritual path is, many of us, myself included, because life was a mess. But the beauty of where so many of us are now is your life's not a mess anymore. Doesn't mean everything's perfect. Doesn't mean that there aren't still issues we're dealing with. It doesn't mean, like I said, that we're enlightened masters. But we have reached a point in our collective, as a generation of seekers, where you might not be perfect, but you're good enough. You might not be perfect, but you're good enough. You might not be perfect, but you're good enough. That we actually are already at a point. It's simply the awakening, like that woman in London. Just that tweak. The Course in Miracles talks about a miracle being a shift in perception from fear to love. For all of us to stand up, we have a crisis of adulthood in our societies. Our men aren't standing up as men, and women aren't standing up as women. We have a crisis here. And when we allow ourselves, so many of us, well, my mother was this or my father was that, and that is true. But the point of spiritual progress is a cosmic reparenting. Your mother was not your mother. Your father was not your father. God is your mother and God is your father. And when we make that transition, which is what the ceremony of adolescence is, that's what the bar mitzvah is, that's what the bat mitzvah is, that's what the indigenous cultures, when we cut that cord from the psychological attachment to the mortal parent, to accept the parentage of the divine. Then we realize, as the Course in Miracles says, that we are children of divine inheritance, all of us. The Course in Miracles says, why do you keep trying to get the wings of a sparrow when the wings of an eagle have been given you? The Course in Miracles says, all of the children of God are special, and none of the children of God are special. The Course in Miracles says that each and every one of us, when you think of some of the geniuses that have lived on this planet, and we're in Dublin, hello. So we're going to talk about the literary geniuses alone of the planet, right here. The Course in Miracles says when you think of the people on this planet who have achieved the most, they have scratched the surface of what each and every one of us are capable of. We are like people who have, we call them in the United States a safety deposit box. I don't know what you call it here, where somebody put unlimited money in there. And you have the key, but nobody told you about it. Or they told you about it, but you can't hear because you're listening to the people who tell you have nothing. And when we go to that box in any given moment and turn the key, so what does that mean? That means that when we make our devotion, when we realize what's going on this planet, and I do believe that it is, I believe this viscerally, people are good. People, everywhere I go, I travel a lot, and we all know this, people are good. People, the vast majority of people on this planet are filled with, we all want to be noble, and we want to be creative, and we want to be happy, and we want to be giving. It's not that we don't. So what's happening on this planet where the vast majority of people are filled with love and decency, and then you have a very few people on the planet who really hate? But why is that hatred having such power? Well, from a metaphysical perspective, it's because those who hate today hate with conviction. And conviction is a force multiplier. When you think of ISIL, Hezbollah, or any of them, we sometimes say about terrorists that they're cowards, but they're actually not cowards. There's a perverse courage to a suicide bomber. These are not kind of, sort of, sometimes when it's convenient, I will do this. They are convicted, and they are very intent on effectuating the worldview that they believe in. On the other hand, too many of us, aren't we, kind of, sort of, sometimes casually when it's convenient, committed to love, when I have time and I have the bandwidth? And only our stepping into, from the time we wake up in the morning, dear God, use me. Use me. Now, there's one particular religion, and it's the Christian one, that introduced this concept that you can either serve God or do I want to be happy? That's very sick. See, I'm Jewish. We didn't have that. Because from a spiritual perspective, the only way to be happy is to serve God. Because to serve God means to serve love. If I love you, you're probably going to like me more. Hello. If I love you and I'm good, you're probably going to want to hire me and be around me and have me on your team. If I live as a vessel of love and I go into every situation with my mind bent on blessing you rather than blaming you, then because everybody subconsciously knows everything, you won't know why, but you'll like me more. Hello? So the idea here is that this malignant consciousness, we've become, something really terrible has happened. We have become, do you have this here where, have you noticed this trend in the last few years? You're about to go into a meeting and somebody says to you, have you ever had somebody say to you, okay, now what's our intention for this meeting? How many of you have heard that one? What's your intention for this meeting? That is so sick. Because what it is we've turned relationships into transactions. Because if I have an intention for this meeting, that means that I'm programming my subconscious mind to basically manipulate you in whatever way necessary to get what I want from you. This is nothing positive. Whereas if I pour light on you in my mind before I even go into the meeting, bless you, the love in me, salute you with the love of God, the love in you. I don't say this, of course. But it's your thinking, then it creates a field of possibility, synergy, opportunity, win-win that would not otherwise be there. And that is what is happening, I believe, on the planet. There is a spiritual revolution going on. And that spiritual revolution and this evolution of consciousness is not centered in any one area of the world. It is not centered in any one ethnicity or color or sex or sexuality or religion or lack of religion. It's coming up from the bottom of things. Like I said, the Course in Miracles says the teachers of God are those who choose to be one. It's exciting, though, when you think about how many people around the world are catching this idea, realizing that something new is trying to be born. You got a lot of attention, as you know, all over the world. I know Donald Trump is getting attention here. Well, your Easter Rising got attention in my country. I know you know this, and your hundredth, and congratulations to you. There are two things I want to say about your Easter Rising just as someone who is not Irish. First of all, there is one of the things your country and my country share is that we couldn't be ourselves until we separated from England. So we actually share that. It's sociologically very interesting. There is a term in alchemy called separatio. And separatio means that all of the elements have to separate out to become who they essentially are, and then they can join at a higher level. So America had to become America, not tied into what somebody else is. Ireland had to become Ireland, not tied into what somebody else is. As a woman, I have to feel respected as a woman. As a Jew, I have to feel respected as a Jew. You have to feel respected if you're gay. You have to feel respected if you're black. You have to feel respected no matter what. You have to feel that essential respect and getting to stand in the space of that which you are. And that then frees you to join with others at a higher level. You have to get yours first, and then you're ready to form at a higher level. So it's interesting about nationhood, isn't it? Because on one hand, it's extremely important that nations be respected and that nations get to be nations. But now there's a nationhood of man. Now there's a family of man concept as well. That the family of nations becomes more than just concept. The other issue about the Easter Rising that comes up for you, I'm sure, as it comes up for my country when we celebrate the American independence and so forth, is the extraordinary bravery of people in your country and the extraordinary bravery of people in mine. I'm sure that with all of your celebrations around the Easter Rising, there were a lot of stories told. There were a lot of memories that were articulated. Who said we're doing this and who stayed home? Who said maybe we're not going to be successful this time, but we're going to start it. And there were people in Irish history, just like there were people in American history, who were willing to so participate in the struggle, even at the expense of their lives. And they might not have lived to see free Ireland. They might not have lived to see the colonies become the United States of America. But you have what you have, and I have what I have, because they live and lived the way they did. Could we not display in our generation even a fraction of the bravery and the power and the courage that our ancestors displayed? You know, the Irish, when you talk Ireland, you don't have to be Irish to have a passing knowledge of some of the suffering of the Irish people throughout history, some of the terrible oppression of the Irish people throughout history, including in my own country, by the way. But generations rose up, and they changed things. So you and I, and all human beings actually, have a great legacy. And what is happening today, it's kind of like the metaphysics of a compromised immune system. When somebody has contracted the AIDS virus and compromised immune system, the problem is that viruses and so forth that are in the body, that in a healthy body, those white blood cells just eat it up and it's okay. What's happening today is that there are too many opportunistic infections. The problem is not Donald Trump, the problem is how many people agree with him. Right? And I say that I don't want to be in another country putting down any aspect of my country. That's a little untoward, but you know what I'm saying. That there are so many, the issues is not climate change, the issue is that we let it get this bad. The issue is not the ISIL, the issue is first and foremost that we attacked, I understand that you didn't, Iraq. It was the level of consciousness by which humanity is okay with doing things that we should not be okay with. And that is why, not that you can make it happen, these answers are not going to be there's no big brush stroke, that's going to fix climate change. There's not going to be any big brush stroke, that's going to fix state poverty. There's not going to be any big brush stroke that's going to fix ISIL or anything else. It's that we're, to the extent to which we choose, going to honor our incarnation. If you're Irish, you get that that's the call of your soul, is this incarnation. Whatever your country is, whatever your sex is, your sexuality, your color, your ethnicity, your religion, your profession, wherever we are, it's in the present, it's in the circumstances that we are in. They're already perfect. The ego mind is waiting, I need other circumstances. I need it later. I need it to be in another place. Once I have a different job, I'm really going to show up. Once I have a different partner, or even I have a partner, I'm going to really show up. Once I lose this weight, I'm going to really show up. Once I make this money, I'm going to really show up. Once I like where I'm living, I'm going to really show up. Once I'm in a different kind of situation, I'm going to really show up. That's the ego mind. The spiritual mind says, I am right here in this moment. The quantum realm is beyond time. In this moment, with the friends I have, with the situation I have. You know, I have a situation in my life that's kind of a recurring wound. And the Course in Miracles says, only what you are not giving can be lacking in any situation. And I was just having an epiphany this morning. It's like buried under so many layers. What is my part in this? What is my part in this? You know, it doesn't matter if your issues came from mommy or daddy. It doesn't matter. Most of our issues come from childhood wounding by definition. But it doesn't matter where you got them. They're yours now. And endless analysis of where we got them is not what pulls us out of them. It's standing and saying, I understand, regardless of what my pain was, my childhood wounding was that made me this way. What matters is that I get that I am this way. This is my character defect. It's not where you're bad, it's where you're wounded. We understand that. But if you meet anybody who's not an enlightened master on the road and they say you just see you display that behavior, they're not going to say, oh, poor darling, you must have been wounded as a child. They're going to say, oh, you were such a jerk, get me out of here. And even more importantly than that one person's response, to the extent to which we are not in our center of love, we are deflecting miracles. And the universe needs us to be healed. Because if I'm not healed of my stuff, I can't be the woman that can contribute at the highest level. If you're not healed of your stuff, you can't be the man. And so this is more than about me being happy. This is more than about you being happy. This is more than about you being happy. This is so much bigger than you getting what you want. This is about all of us participating in a field of consciousness that is genuinely disruptive at this time. Because the Titanic is headed for the iceberg. The iceberg could be climate change. The iceberg could be nuclear disaster. There are so many forms the iceberg could take. The point is, we need to turn this ship around. I can't turn it around, you can't turn it around, you can't turn it around. But when you rise up to a higher place of possibility within your own self, the healing of your own life, and you, the healing of your own life, and me, the healing of my own life, and all of us then vibrating at a higher frequency, which leads us to collaborate with other people at a higher frequency. And then this exponential force begins to emerge from the collective demonstration of love that is not now evident and manifest on the planet. Then this light of all these lamps that are lit, we're all lamps, but we're not plugged in. No lamp. The house is wired for electricity. The universe is wired with the power of God, and we're all lamps. But if you don't plug it in, I don't care what the shape of the lamp or the form of the lamp or the color of the lamp, it's not going to shed any light. And with every moment of forgiveness, every moment that we bless instead of blame, every moment that we accept rather than attack, every moment we inhabit the light of the present moment's possibility, really showing up in excellence, showing up to be what we can be to the person in front of us, rather than trying to get what we think we want or attach to the past or attach to the future, then that light begins to shine. And when enough of us begin to shine, there will be a light that casts out darkness. I'm not saying if we do this, ladies and gentlemen, and you and I both know it is the 11th hour. Now, it's not midnight yet. Now, as we do this, and as these lamps begin to shine, and as this light begins to occur, I'm not saying that in your lifetime or mine, we will necessarily see the end of all war, and we will not necessarily in our lifetime see the end of all unnecessary suffering on the planet. I'm not saying that. But I'm saying that if we rise up with this level of evolutionary consciousness that is possible today, and we stop playing around, and we stop just collecting data when we know it's time to do it now, rehearsal's over, then what will happen is that even if we don't see everything we want to see in our lifetime, we will die knowing that while we were here, we kicked ass. Thank you very, 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 very much. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you. Thank you. So this is what we're going to do now. We're going to take a break now for about 15 minutes. When we come back, we will do questions and answers and discussion, because we had the whole sort of meta conversation tonight, you know, and then we go into how do we actually, in our own relationships, in our own work lives, in our own whatever. So anything that you want to talk about when we get back. The Course in Miracles prides itself on being a practical course. None of this means anything unless you have a practical, you know, you don't believe this stuff because I or anyone else said it. You try it out and you see how it works. So when we come back, I will do my best to reflect on whatever topic you bring up from metaphysical perspective, and hopefully we will all walk out here tonight thinking in a really real way that miracles are possible. I'll see you in 15 minutes. Thank you.